The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Andrea McMaster.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this edition of Consider This. I'm Andrea McMaster. Losing a loved one is never easy. We experience a range of emotions: anger, confusion, and sadness. For a child, it can also be confusing and frightening. And children do not grieve the same way as adults. This week on Consider This and today's show is the focus on children and how they deal with the grieving process. And I want to introduce to you two guests. Sarah Flanagan, the program director for Teddy Bear Hollow. It is the only center for families with grieving children in our area. And we're glad to have you with us, Sarah.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we also have Amy Lee, who is the mother and a wife who has had to deal with the loss of her husband, mother of 4 children, I must add. So thank you for being here to share your personal experiences as well. Sarah, I'm going to have you start at the beginning here. Just tell us what Teddy Bear Hollow is and some of the services that it provides.
Sure. Teddy Bear Hollow is a nonprofit agency. We started back in 2001 here in Omaha when a group of dedicated professionals, nurses, social workers, teachers, got together with a group of local hospice providers. And they said, you know, we have programs, we have services to help support adults who have experienced a death, but we don't have anything in our greater community that really focuses on meeting the needs of children. And so the idea of Teddy Bear Hollow was born. So for the past 6 years, we've been helping families by providing free bereavement services, support groups, day camps, even a teen camp that we've added, as well as a number of community education pieces so that really the whole community, the whole state, and our society can help embrace and support children through this difficult time.
And you've told me that even though we're in the Omaha area, your organization's in the Omaha area, you have people that travel from really across the state, even South Dakota, that are looking for some services that you offer.
We do. Our primary service area is eastern Nebraska. We have a number of families from Iowa, people who have traveled, 3, 4, 5 hours even to come to one of our day camps that's held on a weekend so that they can participate. There are services within smaller communities in the rural parts of the states through churches primarily, some schools, counselors and teachers are really supportive, but there aren't any centers specifically for children outside of the Omaha and Lincoln area.
Okay. Now we talked about children grieve differently than adults. Talk a little bit about what that means when we say that.
Sure. Well, the way I like to look at it and explain it is that as adults we have a lot of luxuries that children don't have. For starters, we're able to express ourselves verbally. We're able to understand kind of the bigger picture of what happens when someone dies and what are all the different things that come along with that in terms of changes. But for children, they're still maturing physically, spiritually, socially, and emotionally, and for them it can be very confusing and scary when someone dies, when everything as they know it changes or flips upside down. And so some of the things that we look at, for example, for children, they play through their grief and they grieve through their play. And as adults, I could say, you know what, I've had a bad day. I need to go on a walk. Or maybe I want to take a bubble bath and have a glass of wine or go call a friend. But for children, they're not able to do that. And so as adults, it's helpful for us to know that children can't stand that extended duration, that long period of time where we're expecting them to cry. Here, sit down and cry for half an hour. They can't do that. So rather, if we can provide outlets for them to maybe play for a while, we call it puddle jumping. They jump into the puddle of grief. They may be throwing a tantrum. They may be sad. They may be a little clingy. All very normal responses. But then just as quickly, they're going to jump back out and play with their dolls or their trucks or want to go outside and be with their friends. So just as we as adults have different ways that we like to cope, children are similar in that regard.
And also important to point out that the grief doesn't just happen immediately after the loss of a loved one or even just in that first year, that process can continue.
Absolutely.
I think that it really is a wake-up call for a lot of folks because as support people, as friends or family members, we're often right there in the immediate, right after it happens, and forget that maybe 5, 10 years out even, that child or even an adult is still dealing with the grief and the loss of a loved one.
Absolutely. Initially, the first reaction is one of disbelief and shock, a sense of numbness. People may describe it as they just can't understand and grasp, oh my gosh, this has really happened. I didn't see this coming. What am I going to do now? And that can last, for a few weeks to a year, 2-3 years even, for people to kind of get out of that initial phase, as Amy can probably well relate. And then after that is when they start to do more of that processing, when the changes are getting addressed, when the questions arise. And it's very common, as we'll probably talk about shortly, for children to re-grieve at different developmental stages and to look at that loss in a different way. One other thing that parents often will say to us is the hardest part, besides the death when it happened initially, is that support does tend to wane. And it's not, certainly they need you right away, but it's those months following, those years following, that you still need those phone calls. You need that person to stop and drop by for a cup of coffee or to take the kids out to the park for a while. It's that as families and as a community, to continue that support is most helpful.
Amy, reintroduce you here now. I know that that's probably really evident for you because it's only been a couple of years since you lost your husband.
Right.
And you do have 4 children who are now ages 14, 11, 9, and 6. So it keeps you busy. And probably as a mother, you have to still continue to be focused on them, but you're dealing with your own grieving, and you're dealing with how to teach grieving to children of all different ages. And I'm sure they're seeing it in all different ways. So just tell us a little bit about how you found Teddy Bear Hollow and some of the experiences that you've just kind of initially been going through.
Sure. My husband Eric died 2 years ago. He had cancer. It was an unexpected death. Although he had cancer, he had just actually completed his treatment program and got very ill. So it was kind of a surprise to us, when I say that my husband died of cancer and it was a surprise, people don't believe me, but it was. But so 2 years ago, it was 2 years ago, just this past July. And we found Teddy Bear Hollow. It was actually recommended to me through a number of different avenues. I first heard about it from hospice at the hospital. And then I had a number of family, friends, and acquaintances. Some people called or sent me a brochure and said, Teddy Bear Hollow is a great place. I really think your kids might like it. And in the immediacy of my own grief, and not being able to, I knew my kids needed me and needed something, help or understanding or support, and I could not give that to them at that moment. And so I knew that I needed to get them some support, and Teddy Bear Hollow just was a great place for that. Okay. We participated initially in a monthly support group, just once a month, went there, and then we did the holiday day camp, the Tinsel and Tears, and that helped us prepare for those first holidays. And then we did a weekly support group a little bit later after that. So we've done a little bit of everything almost, I think.
And did you see that did help your children?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The one thing I love about Teddy Bear Hollow, it gives kids a variety of ways to express their grief. And like Sarah said earlier, I can say I'm pretty aware of my emotions and say, I'm sad today, I'm going to cry. Or I'm mad today, I'm going to go bowl because I can throw things and knock things down and nobody thinks I need to be hospitalized. But kids aren't so good at that. They're not yet, they just don't have that equipment. They don't have those tools to identify their emotions or to express them in that way. So that's something that I really appreciate about Teddy Bear Hollow, and for my kids especially was so good, was they had lots of opportunities and a variety of ways to express what they were feeling, mostly through art and crafts and those kinds of things that were very helpful for them because it's such a hands-on thing. So it kind of kept their hands busy, but they would talk while they were doing it. Teddy Bear is great about backdooring stuff. They get the kids busy and then ask questions because they talk when they're busy with their hands. It seems they talk a lot better. So those are the kinds of things my kids got to do. And it was very helpful for them to be in a place where they were not the only ones who had a dad die or a parent die. I think that was probably really important, especially for my grade school age children, for them to know that they're not the only ones in life who experienced loss and tragedy and hard stuff. And that was real important for them.
And I know that you probably saw this, just each of your children, even different personalities, but the different ages and how they were grieving differently. And so talk a little bit about that, Sarah, and just what our eyes should be open to about how children at what ages are going to be grieving differently, and what will we notice at different ages.
Sure. There are great differences, and really it comes down to just biology. And what a lot of people don't understand, and a lot of questions that we get from parents, are just basically not understanding where their children are coming from and why their smaller children may be acting or reacting differently than their older children. And a real basic understanding is that until children are 6 or 7, sometimes even 8 years old, their brains have not yet developed to the point where they're capable of understanding the permanence of death. Meaning, for a small child, they don't understand that that person, when they die, they're not coming back. And so oftentimes parents will say, I don't know what to say to my child because they keep asking, when is mommy coming back? Why can't daddy be here to play with me? And for a parent, that's very hard because you need to know, gosh, what do I say to comfort my child while also explaining what this means? And so for the younger children, and just so that everyone knows, a child at any age can grieve. We have many children who come to us the mother was pregnant with a child when a father died, for example, but that child still has every need to feel connected and to feel loved by that person who died, even though he or she may not have yet been born. And so even with the little children, for them oftentimes it's the routine that's changed. They don't understand why that person isn't there anymore, and so for kids, they'll want to understand or ask questions about, why can't we still go outside and play? Why isn't grandma here to give me my bath on Sunday nights like she always is? Why can't daddy be here to fix hamburgers? Those kinds of things for the little kids are hard to understand. Once they get to be a little bit older, 7, 8, 9 and up, their brains have developed to the point where they understand that, oh my gosh, dad died. That's rotten, that's horrible, I'm sad and I'm angry, and that's when they learn to express and identify what these different feelings are and what those feelings look like. And as they get older, they're able to question even more about, what does this mean for me? For especially those early adolescents and teenagers, what is my identity? Who am I now that this person who was so critical in my life is gone? Am I still a son or daughter? Do I still have a dad or a mom or a grandparent? Well, you do. They're just not here. And so the kids basically move from a spectrum of being very concrete to one to where they're able to be more abstract. And we tailor our activities and our discussions very much around where those children are so that we're able to have age appropriate and developmental appropriate activities.
Amy, I don't know if this would be too hard for you to do, so Sarah can do it too, but just talk a little bit about maybe an example of a discussion, like with one of your children, of how you shared that dad wasn't here anymore and how you helped them through some of the grieving process, so that if there is someone watching who's dealing with that at home, they'd have something concrete.
You know, for me, when I had to tell my kids that their dad died, you know, I was honest with them, and they had known that he was sick, but he got so severely ill so quickly that I hadn't had time really to prepare them very well. But I was honest with them, and for me, you know, my faith played a big part in how I explained that to my kids. You know, there's some great books out there that help, and I can't think of the name of the book I'm thinking of, but one book, we talked a lot in my family about how on earth we have earth bodies, but in heaven we have heaven bodies, or earth suits and heaven suits. So daddy had to leave his earth suit, but now he has his heaven suit, and he lives in heaven with Jesus, and that's kind of how we explained it. You know, but even those explanations, while initially were enough, over the long term are not. I mean, I find over 2 years, you know, Samantha was only 4 when Eric died, and initially she didn't even miss her dad. And that really offended my other kids, because we would be talking about, do you miss daddy? And she would say, no, I don't miss daddy. Why don't you miss daddy? Well, because I know where he is, and he's in heaven with Jesus, and he's okay, and I'll see him again. Well, now 2 years later, you know, I think the whole permanency thing of it, she's having a much harder time and she misses him. She told me just the other day, I miss Daddy all the time. All the time. And that's, you know what I said, you know, sweetie, Mommy misses Daddy all the time too. And sometimes it's just a matter of saying, yep, me too. Because you can't fix it for him, you can't make it better for him. It's their grief, they have to, in many ways, wrestle with it inside themselves, but you know, just offering understanding, I think. So, you know, my oldest really dealt with the identity thing. Who am I now? Now that Dad died, who am I? And as a matter of fact, his favorite song for a long time was a song called Who Am I by Casting Crowns. And so he really wrestled with that initially, although seems to be much more secure in that now. But initially that totally did that. And then my middle kids were kind of in that between. I had one who really understood the permanency of it because he was 9 when Eric died, and one who kind of over the course of the first year came to that because she was just 7. So I really have dealt and continue to deal with the wide range of issues with that. But I think the most important thing is to be honest, even if it means saying, I don't know.
And you probably will always deal with this.
Always. One of the biggest things I learned at Teddy Bear Hall is that my kids will grieve this loss for their entire lives. And in a way, I knew that. And at first, that made me very angry and sad for my kids. But it has helped me to, I think, be a better mom to them, to understand that, you know, the death of their dad's not something they're going to get over. Something they will learn to deal with, but they will never get over it. And that's okay. I think in the long run, I pray it will make them more compassionate human beings, more compassionate people, but they won't ever get over it.
Are there some unhealthy signs that you might see in a child that they are not grieving correctly, or something that you really say, oh, this is a red flag to me, we really need to deal with this?
Sure. There isn't a right or a wrong way to grieve because every individual and every family is unique, but what we look for overall are healthy behaviors. And we really try and put an entire wellness program into place. And some signs people may want to look for, just to clarify, many things are very common following a death. What we look at is how long do they last. So it's very common for children to have trouble sleeping or to sleep too much, to have a change in appetite, a change in socially, you know, their social circles, their friends, whether or not they're more withdrawn or more social than before, a change in grades, a change in behavior. Even very commonly we see a regression. And so for a child at whatever age they may be, it's very common for them to go back a couple of years because it's back to that sense of safety and security and things as they knew it. So for small children, they may be wetting the bed, there may be baby talk, there may be little arguments among siblings that maybe weren't there before. Those are all very normal. What we look at is how long do those last? When does it come to a point where it's impeding the child or the family's ability to function in a healthy way? And children pick up their cues from the adults in their lives. So for parents, grandparents, even neighbors or other support people to be aware, the children are watching and they're sponges, and their behaviors and reactions are going to reflect what they're seeing from the adults around them. So just to be aware of that a lot of times we'll get parents, and Amy kind of touched on this in terms of being honest with children. We'll have parents say, especially if it was a violent death, a homicide, a suicide, or a tragic car accident, you know, this is what happened, but my child, I don't want him or her to know that yet. And that's a really touchy issue, and that's hard because it depends on how old that child is and how much you say. But we always encourage parents to be honest, because what happens are those adults in our lives or those peers at school or daycare, they know, and they're going to be talking about it. And so the children are either A, going to pick up and already know what happened, and then sometimes feel upset or betrayed that the other parent or family member didn't tell them, or B, they're going to get bits and pieces and construct in their own mind something that's even scarier than what really happened. And so the more honest you can be with that child based on his or her age and developmental level, really the better, both immediate and in the long term.
Okay. What's Is there anything that's just really, really comforting to offer to a child in the immediacy after a loss of a loved one?
I think there are a number of things. I think a lot of times as adults we think that we have to be able to do something real profound to fix it or to take it away, and we can't change what happened. But to help that child feel free to talk about not only how they're feeling, but tell me more about that person who died. What was their name? What was their favorite food? What did you like to do together? Because that normalizes for this child what happened, and then it's okay to talk about it and to bring about items that belong to that person. One thing we do at Kids Camp, which is a day camp that we hold 3 times a year, is we do an activity called Comfort Pillows. And the children are invited to bring with them a shirt or pajama pants, or if it was a baby, a onesie, anything that was clothing that person wore. And we have a whole line of ladies sitting with their sewing machines. And the child goes up and they get to pick whatever shape or size of pattern they want, and they cut that out, and the sewers sew that into their very own comfort pillow. And one story, if I can share a quick story, we had 2 little boys who came about 5 years ago after their mother had died. They were 7 and 8, and they came and they had brought this. Mom liked to be outdoors, a big flannel shirt that Mom wore, and they brought it to Kids Camp, and they didn't want to cut it up, and I don't blame them. You know, they wanted to keep Mom's shirt as it was, and so what they ended up doing is they went up and they just stitched the arms shut and across the waistline and the neck. And one of the sewers was smart enough to say, well, tell me more about this, boys. And they said, well, before Mom died, every day we'd hurry home from school, we'd do our homework, and we'd have supper, and we'd sit down as a family to watch our favorite TV program. And Mom would sit in the middle, and I'd be here, and my brother would be here, and she'd put her arms out around us. So what they were thinking at 7 and 8 years old was enough insight to know that if they took that pillow home, they could still come home from school, have dinner with Dad, and sit down to watch TV with Mom's arms in the form of this pillow around them. And it felt like Mom, and it smelled like Mom, and even though she couldn't be there, they were absolutely able to connect with her in a very spiritual and physical way by doing that.
That's really a neat story. Thank you for sharing that. I want you to talk a little bit more in depth about what Teddy Bear Hollow provides for services for families who are listening.
Sure. We're growing. In the past 6 years, we've served over 2,500 participants, and so every year we're adding more as the demand grows. But some of the basic services we offer, kind of our core program, is what we call our evening support groups. And we used to, when Amy and the kids went through, it was a weekly program. Now we've gone to an every other week format. So families will come to us on either a Monday or a Tuesday and commit to coming every other night for 8 sessions. So they're getting 16 weeks of support, which we have planned to coincide with the school year, which we find fits, and it can be real helpful for families. They start out with a potluck meal, so families, we never charge families to participate in any program. For this particular support group, they're invited to bring a food item to share, and we've had some fabulous homemade dishes as well as things picked up from the deli so that families can contribute. And around that food time is really a chance to build that community, to get to know those other families, to share some of those stories. The kids go off and play with their new friends. And then we break into our age-appropriate groups. So we have a group for little ones who are preschoolers and kindergartners, a primary group for 1st through 3rd graders, upper elementary, middle school, teens, and adults. Typically, we even have adult groups meeting in 2 separate rooms to accommodate all of the adults that accompany the children. During that group time, what we do is engage in a variety of activities and discussions around a certain theme. So for example, one night the theme may be identifying and coping with feelings. So the kids will talk at whatever level they're at about what do different feelings look like, what does this mean, and what can you do to support yourself during those times when you may feel sad or lonely.
We don't have a lot of time left, so I want to interject here and just have Amy, you just share real quickly just what advice do you have for families experiencing a loss? I know you're still dealing with it yourself. But
I would say for the adults, take care of yourself. Get rest, eat food, get a massage, go bowling. Because you cannot give to your kids what you're not getting. Taking care of yourself includes doing your own grief work. Sarah mentioned earlier that kids are watching the adults around them and they are sponges. And if they see you avoiding your grief, they will avoid it too. So as hard as that might be, to be very diligent, whether that's joining a support group or journaling or praying or talking to a pastor or a priest or friends. I mean, you have to do your own grief work and take care of yourself, because you cannot give to your kids what you're not getting. And that includes comfort and support. So you have to be very diligent about getting that. And I also think I would say talk. Talk about your loved one who died. Say their name. Talk about memories. Talk about how you're feeling, whether it's sad, mad, glad, or afraid. Talk all the time.
Talk with people that can offer you support, and also talk with your children.
Talk with your children. I think it's really important to keep your kids talking. It's really important, because the less they talk, the more they stuff. At least I find that with my kids. If they're not talking about their dad, I get really concerned when they're not talking about dad for a while. So I say, what do you think about dad lately? You know, have you had any dad dreams? Have you, what have you put in your memory box? My kids have memory boxes. Those kinds of things to trying to keep them talking all the time.
That's good.
So I would say those two things. Take care of yourself and talk.
And Teddy Bear Hollow, is it only for if you've lost a mommy or a daddy?
No, Teddy Bear Hollow serves families with any type of loss. It may be a family member, it may be extended family, it could even be a classmate, a friend, a neighbor, a coach. Anyone who had a critical role or relationship to that child is invited to come.
Okay, I'm going to give the information here real quickly. For more information about Teddy Bear Hollow, you can call 402-502-2773 or log on to their website, which is www.teddybearhollow.org. I thank you so much for being here today, Amy, for sharing just, such a passionate story. Our heart goes out to you and your family, as I know people continue to pray and offer you support here in the community on how important that is. So we do have a couple seconds left here, so if you just want to offer anything, Sarah, in the last minute of just what you would want to say to family members who are dealing with something like this.
Sure. I would just invite families, if you have questions, if you're not sure what to do, just ask someone at your church, one of your friends. Call Teddy Bear Hollow. We don't all have the answers. We're not all equipped with those tools, and education is a big part of the process. And second thing is, children still need to play. They still need to laugh and have fun and be silly, and that's just as important as everything else.
That's a good one to end on. So thank you very much, Sarah Flanagan with Teddy Bear Hollow. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Consider This.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.